Hey guys, all three of you, if you're there, go ahead and there's Bobby Joe. Thank you, Bobby Joe. I forgot to fix the delay problem again too. It's not actually a problem, but for some reason like YouTube has it set to just put on a delay, and yeah. So, hey guys, what we're gonna do is I was trying to upload something, and that's why the what do you call it? The thumbnail doesn't match because I was going to upload a different Devon Stack video, which is equally good, but I'm going to do this one instead. It's going to be about the movie Office Space, and I am excited because Rockman is live with me, and he's going to tell you how this movie red pilled him in some way. Tell us, Rockman, how this movie red pilled you, and say hi to the folks that are in the chat.
Well, I mean, the movie that initially red pilled me was Office Space, and then I saw Falling Down shortly after that, and it's essentially just as relevant now as it was then, if not more so, because we see the differences of the agenda then compared to now, and how it all just goes full circle.
If you were to describe what it means to be black pilled, Rockman, what would you say that means? What does it mean to be black pilled?
I would describe being black pilled as overdosing on red pills to the point of hopelessness.
Okay, I would say that. Now I don't have a definition exactly, but I would say that being black pilled maybe means that you've kind of gone to where you're understanding how the white population is getting pushed back and out of the scene in a lot of ways, that the white man is the bad guy, and who's really behind that. And a lot of people would say the Jews, as we've been saying, but we're kind of starting to learn that maybe it's the Jesuits.
Yeah, and I'm also realizing in hindsight that different groups of people are targeted in different ways, as we've seen in like the inner cities in the 80s and 90s.
So bear with me. I keep muting myself when you go on because I went back on last night to listen to our video with Ben's, and there was an echo, so I'm just trying to keep it muted. But so how did Office Space red pill? What about it red pilled you?
Okay, so I was still in elementary school, probably like fifth or sixth grade. So a lot of like the jokes and the dry humor and the settings and everything, you would think would be over my head, but to me, it was like I was looking at like a potential future, like where I was going to be within like 10 or 15 years, sitting in a cubicle, tapping on a computer, and essentially, I would describe that as a self fulfilling prophecy. And I did basically after watching that movie, I did everything I could to avoid that kind of scenario, including joining the Air Force. And of course, things took a different turn.
Yeah, so there's not a delay, but I have to go to unmute myself. But, okay, so that's that's funny because when I watched it, I didn't see myself at all in it. But of course, I'm not a white male, but I certainly thought it was hilarious because I too I have an entrepreneurial bone. Like many of my bones are entrepreneurial. So I've been fired from a lot of 9 to 5 jobs. I used to think there was something wrong with me, but I realized that's why I've been fired. It all made sense now. I was like, oh, now that I understand how entrepreneurial I am, I've been fired from jobs because I don't like the 9 to 5 schedule, because I will work hard. But if I'm not rewarded for my work, I will totally go against the whole system and end up getting fired. So I looked at this movie and I'm like, that's not going to be me.
Yeah, that system essentially functions as kind of like a bird cage, and a bird cage doesn't work very well on American eagles.
So we're not going to watch the whole movie. So the whole movie is Office Space. If you guys have never seen the movie Office Space, we're going to show you. Devon Stack is a brilliant. Well, I don't know. He covers a lot of things. Now, here's the thing: is you can't be one of these people in here that's like so pro Q and so pro Trump and MAGA hatting it all the way up and down the street, because you're not going to like Devon Stack if that's who you are. But he is so good at what he does when he describes movies that I've watched all of his video all his movie coverages. In fact, and he's done TV shows, because what he does often is he portrays how the white man is getting pushed out, And it's true, you guys, it's very much true that the white Protestant community is who the Jesuits and the Jews and the Masons are all fighting against, because we're the ones that are going to stand up against this. So I have put a link in the bio for Devon Stack. I will share the link just to this video right now because I have it easily accessible. But anyway, that's why I say I think the black-pilled people tend to be the ones that are calling out the Jews the most. But I think even they're not there yet, because as we're learning, it seems to be the Jesuits. But is there anything else you wanted to say about this before we just show this video, which runs about 35 minutes, but is so worth watching, you guys, and I want you to watch it with me. And we're going to be in the chat. Rockman and I are going to be in the chat with you guys. So anything else you want to say about it, and then we'll play it, and we'll come around. We'll play the whole thing through. We won't stop it, and then we'll talk about it on the other side, if that's all right with you. What do you think?
Absolutely. I just wanted to add that, ironically, watching black-pilled content is kind of like, it kind of helps you when you're black-pilled. I also want to comment on the rhetoric that we're talking about has essentially been exponentially increasing for the last, I'd say 10 to 15 years, and not longer. It all started in the universities, institutions, and stuff. And we're essentially seeing the fruits that are born of all that. So that's all I wanted to say.
All right, and I also want to mention I have a raffle up with only 4 spots left where you win 2 ounces of silver, and they're both Buffalo Round and Buffalo Bar. And when you're like, what does that mean? It's the old nickel that had the buffalo and what they call the Indian head. I'm not politically correct, so I still call it the Indian head or the Buffalo Bar, Buffalo Round. That's 2 ounces of silver. I know it looks like it's 4 ounces, but I just want to show the front and the back of each one. One side's the buffalo, one side's the Indian head, and so these are 1 ounce each of pure silver, 0.999. You get 2 ounces if you win. There's 4 spots left. You pay through Streamlabs or you pay through Cash App. It's all here on the community. You're like, how do I get to community? Well, you're already on my YouTube. So you go to home, videos, playlist, community. You can do it from a phone. You can do it from a computer. So there it is. And without further ado then, since we don't have anything else to add, Rockman, I can't mute you. So while it's playing, if you can mute yourself, when it's over, we'll come around on the other side and we'll talk about it, okay?
Absolutely.
All right, guys, here we go. And a 3, a 2, a 1.
If you're familiar with my channel, you know that I usually reveal the subversive nature in films that are pumping propaganda into the soft little minds of the audience. And while in some ways this video is no different, in fact, it probably has the most effective propaganda in terms of compelling the audience to action than any other film I'm aware of, but I hesitate to call it a subversive film. This film, when I first saw it, I was working for a large computer company that had grown way too big, way too fast, and the baby boomers in management, in classic boomer capitalist fashion, became so blinded with greed, despite record profits, they decided to put all their focus and energy on enriching themselves and the shareholders at the expense of the employees and the customers who had made the growth happen in the first place. This would eventually lead to that company imploding in on itself, but not before they hired efficiency experts to come in and try to squeeze every penny of profit out of their employees by tracking every second of their time, literally every second, and their customers by nickeling and diming them for services that used to be free. The working conditions became so unbearable that many of the best and brightest left the company. And in an effort to stave off the brain drain that had begun in response to these efficiency experts, the company instituted carefully timed and condescending corporate team building activities like pizza parties and movie lunches, like an elementary school teacher would for their classroom if they would just behave. It was during one of these movie luncheons that my manager made a fatal mistake. She brought us into the conference room and we gathered around the TV and we watched this film we're about to talk about. The very next day, completely independent of each other, 3 of the most senior employees didn't show up for work. never called in, and were never seen or heard from again. I was one of these employees. And that movie, if you haven't guessed already, is the 1999 film by Mike Judge, Office Space. I've actually spoken to several people who have their own variation of this story after watching the film. In fact, the lead actor was interviewed about the film recently, about Office Space becoming kind of a cult classic, and he remarked that to this day, people come up to him on a regular basis to tell him that they quit their job immediately after seeing this film.
People will come up to me from time to time and say, you know, this movie, and you were the reason that I quit my job and walked away from my livelihood.
Changing jobs is one of the most stressful things a man can do, yet this film, after telling a story for 90 minutes, has motivated countless Americans to do exactly that. And not just quit, but in many cases just stop showing up for work completely. So what made this film so powerful? What was it about Office Space that could account for this phenomenon? Well, it's because it told the truth. It told the truth about corporate America, but also the truth about an aspect of white men that makes many people who write films uncomfortable. You see, Office Space wasn't written by people that typically write films in Hollywood. It was written and directed by Mike Judge, a white male who didn't come from Hollywood or money and had worked in the real world before. He understood white men better than most of Hollywood, and an aspect of their behavior that's relevant today. Lately, I've heard people say the phrase, and I've said it myself, that white men are nice until they're not. Now, to some people, that sounds like maybe a passive-aggressive threat, but it's not. It's descriptive of how many white men process conflict. Some people, when they attempt to describe this behavior, will conjure up the image of a kid getting bullied and bullied and bullied until one day he snaps. They make it seem as if this kid, who obviously is a metaphor for the white man, is like a canister of volatile material that's just getting shaken and shaken until the pressure builds up and it explodes. But this totally misunderstands the process. Office Space walks us through the real steps of what's going on in the minds of white men when faced with conflict. It acknowledges that the extreme reaction to the outside danger isn't something that slowly develops. It's not the product of pressure being applied over time that makes their solution to the conflict more and more extreme as the pressure builds up until they snap. But instead, if you really understand the process, you understand that the initial solution in the minds of these men is extreme. And there is no snap. There is simply a slow erosion of the self-control that's containing that initial instinct to deliver a devastating response. The initial extreme solution is rarely acted upon because it's typically so extreme, so severe, that given time to rationally weigh the consequences of carrying it out and assessing the collateral damage, the rational mind often concludes that enduring the problem and tolerating the danger seems safer than executing the extreme solution. From the very start of the conflict, that is the equation. These men will table what seems like an extreme solution to a problem in the hopes that the problem will resolve itself, or that a less extreme solution presents itself later, and they'll delay until the stress generated by the conflict or the problem or the perceived danger outweighs the perceived or predicted collateral damage that might come with being assertive and taking the extreme action that they have in mind. I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about, but if this seems confusing, it'll make more sense as we walk through the film, because this is at the very heart of the film. It's white men faced with conflict who come up immediately with extreme but effective methods of resolving the conflict, but wait until they can no longer justify waiting or sense that danger might be imminent, and then they enact these extreme solutions. So let's dive in. The movie starts out immediately developing the ultimate problem or the conflict that the main character has, the dehumanizing conditions that existed for people unlucky enough to work in an office job in the 90s that was micromanaged by profit-centric boomers. The first challenge of this way of life is, of course, being stuck in traffic, with countless other office workers going to their various office spaces, changing lanes and then watching the lane you were just in begin to move and then changing back only to have the traffic inexplicably stop for no reason. From the very beginning of your day, it's just frustration after frustration. We're introduced to Peter, the protagonist, and briefly some of his co-workers. Next, we see an establishing shot of the office space in question, a place called Initech, a buzzwordy generic name typical of the countless tech companies that sprang into existence in the 90s. Peter's boomer boss, Bill Lumbergh, has made sure, of course, that he has a reserved parking spot and he drives a Porsche. The massive wealth inequality that we see today is something that's been in the making for a long time, and this was kind of the beginnings of some of that. We see the inane modern corporate art that adorns the outside of many of these office buildings, and while I'm not positive if it was intentional, it's interesting to note that it's a square peg that is being put through a round hole, which is exactly what it felt like to work in many of these one-size-fits-all type of corporations. Peter, wearing his security badge and business-appropriate shirt and tie, starts his day dreading opening the doors to the office, thanks to the static electric shock he receives when he touches the handle. He works in a drab, bland, gray room of cubicles that looks identical to many of the offices in the 90s, including the office where I worked. It literally looked exactly like this room. Each cubicle is like a little gray prison cell that features all the negative aspects of being surrounded by walls with none of the benefits. Benefits like blocking out the voices of everyone else around you, or stopping your boss, Bill Lumbergh, from just dropping in. Bill tells Peter that he forgot to include a cover sheet on his TPS report, and we easily infer from the context that whatever that means and whatever a TPS report is, it's clearly some mundane micromanagement busy work that's likely completely pointless. After that, we meet Milton. Milton is the first and clear-cut example of the extreme problem resolution strategy that we discussed earlier. Also, many people don't know this, but Milton is modeled after a cartoon character that inspired the entire movie in the first place. Milton is also, because in some ways he's the main character, even though the film doesn't seem to be really focused on him, he is close to encountering his conflict and generating this initial extreme resolution to the problem. But first, Peter now encounters another boomer boss, Dom, who berates him about the same TPS reports, followed by a phone call about the exact same reports. This is highlighting the source of the real inefficiencies that existed in these offices. All too often, micromanagement was a one wielded by the boomers who, despite a complete lack of tech skills, were managing these tech workers. So what they would do, and I saw this in real life at several different companies, they would have to justify their existence and their salary, which was usually twice that of their workers. And so what they would do is they would just micromanage the hell out of everything and just add as much paperwork and unnecessary steps to justify their existence and make it look as though they were doing something. And at Initech, it's no different. We now meet Samir, a H-1B visa holder, back when there were so few of them, we could still kind of have a sense of humor about it. and back when our culture was still dominant, so we could make fun of the cultural differences without anyone losing their minds. One of those differences is happening right now. It's important to note that Samir is reacting differently than the white characters due to conflict. Instead of coming up with an extreme, elaborate, oftentimes solution to be acted upon later when all other options have run out. When this printer, for example, has a paper jam, or when he's driving to work, he reacts instantly with anger and violence. This is part of the honesty of the film. This violent reaction is the joke, and it's funny because it's true. It's believable. His reaction is foreign to the wider culture. We also meet Michael, who's also frustrated with his job and hates that his name is Michael Bolton because he hates the singer, Michael Bolton. Peter, Samir, and Michael go to a chain restaurant called Chotsky's to get some coffee. The chain restaurant is the unbearable workplace for wage-slaving corporate Gen Xers of the blue-collar variety. The environment might seem different than the office at Initech, but as we'll see, it's just as dehumanizing and micromanaged by the same kinds of people. This is where Peter reveals the theme of the movie. Everything we've been discussing about extreme responses to problems. One of the first things that happens after being introduced to the characters is Peter, the main character, jokes that his solution to his problems at Initech might be just coming into work and shooting up the place. Obviously, this is a joke, but this is what I mean by white men come up with an extreme solution first. He didn't slowly build up to this solution. His initial reaction to the bad day that he's having is to shoot the place up. Now, obviously, the risks heavily outweigh the benefits, so there's no chance he'll act on this extreme solution, but it's the first one that came to mind. His rational mind then assessed it as ridiculous, so he laughs it off and continues to endure the problem rather than act on this extreme thought. But it doesn't change the fact that he had the thought. That was his first reaction. And that's what we'll see again and again and again in the film. The three office workers complain about their work, and this is where we're introduced to Michael's extreme solution to the problem that he's having in Initech. He mentions that he could program a virus that would rip the place off. But just like Peter, the rational part of his mind sees this as way too risky a response given his current situation, so it's simply repressed until conditions change. We also briefly see a young Jennifer Aniston who plays the waitress named Joanna that Peter has a crush on but is afraid to approach. We also learn that Peter has a girlfriend who is likely cheating on him and who wants him to see a hypnotherapist to help him get out of his rut. The three run into Tom, and Tom essentially sets up the major conflict of the film. He's another white guy who later deals with problems with extreme solutions. He tells them that efficiency experts are coming in to streamline the office, and he's afraid they're all going to get laid off. At the end of the day, Peter comes home, and we see the typical shitty 90s apartment. After working all day in your cubicle prison cell, you go home to your IKEA-furnished apartment prison cell, clumped together just as closely as the cubicles at your office. Peter's neighbor, Lawrence, who can hear everything that goes on in his apartment through the wall, is a blue-collar worker, the kind of guy that the popular culture likes to present as uneducated, uncouth, and dirty. You don't want to do jobs like Lawrence. That's for people like him. Although in a few years, those jobs will go to hordes of illegal immigrants. This is where Peter talks about his problems with his job, and he reveals his extreme solution to the problem. It's to simply stop participating, to stop consenting to being micromanaged. The next day, the efficiency experts have arrived with a huge banner that reads, "Is this good for the company?" All the employees are gathered around Bill Lumbergh to listen to his condescending corporate pep talk about not wasting Post-it notes and working extra hours for free. Next, we see Milton, and now Milton reveals his extreme solution to his problem, Bill Lumbergh, pushing him around. He tells Peter on the phone, who is completely ignoring him, that he is going to burn the building to the ground. That's Milton's initial extreme response to the stress he's under. If he reaches a certain threshold where he perceives the consequences of burning the building to the ground as having less of a negative impact on him than the humiliation that he suffers at the hands of Bill Lumbergh, he will execute this initial extreme response. Again, this is not a situation where Milton is slowly pushed off the edge and then he snaps and then decides to burn the building to the ground. His starting point is burning the building to the ground. And he will exercise all the restraint that he has to keep from executing this solution. Until, of course, certain conditions are met and that solution seems reasonable. Bill Lumbergh catches Peter before he can sneak out for the weekend and tells him that he needs to work both Saturday and Sunday. This was something that Peter was trying to avoid because he wanted to go fishing. Dejected and depressed, he accepts these orders from Bill Lumbergh and then goes with his girlfriend to see the occupational hypnotherapist later that night. The therapist begins to hypnotize Peter. He tells Peter to forget his worries, his cares, his inhibitions. But before he can move on beyond that, he drops dead of a heart attack. Peter is now stuck in a state of hypnosis. In a way, he no longer has the ability to assess the risks of acting upon these initial extreme solutions to different situations. In a sense, Peter's brain has been hacked and relieved of this process. He will now just act immediately on his first impulse when faced with problems. So the next morning he wakes up, and instead of going to work, he listens to his first impulse to just go back to bed. He also ignores the several phone calls when Bill Lumbergh starts calling him to see where he's at because his initial response is to just not answer the phone. When he does finally get up, it's 3 in the afternoon. His girlfriend calls and she's complaining to him for missing work and acting strange. So his first solution that he comes up with in his brain is to just hang up on her. And that's what he does. This, of course, causes her to break up with him, but he doesn't care. He just goes back to bed, where he stays for the rest of the weekend. Monday morning comes around and they're having another soul-crushing corporate ethics meeting on how to save money for the company at Initech. Peter's nowhere to be found because instead of going to work, his first impulse was to go next door to Chotsky's and ask out the waitress he had a crush on. While that's going on, Tom and Michael are forced to defend their jobs in front of the new efficiency consultants. Back at Chotsky's, Joanna and Peter seem to hit it off. The idea, of course, is that Peter is just being really direct and unflinchingly confident, and women find that attractive because he's no longer tied up weighing the risks and consequences of every little thing that he does, and he's just simply acting on his first impulse, unapologetically. He's taken on the traits of an alpha. This is another important aspect of the film. It explains with simplicity something that connected on a really deep level with several young men who would watch this and then later model this behavior in their own lives. Peter says very matter-of-factly, "I don't like my job, and I don't think I'm going to go anymore." Joanna seems surprised and asks, doesn't he think he'll get fired? And she says it in a way that really illustrates the ever-present paranoia of Gen Xers working pointless jobs, living paycheck to paycheck with no savings. They took the humiliation for one reason and one reason alone, the fear of being fired and unable to pay this growing stack of bills. Peter responds, "I don't know, but I really don't like it, and I'm not going to go anymore." "So you're going to quit?" she asks. "Not really. I'm just going to stop going." Joanna is shocked and says, "Well, how are you going to pay your bills?" To which Peter replies, "You know what? I don't really like paying bills either. I think I'm going to stop doing that too." Joanna is so impressed with his presence that they make a date for that night. Now we go back to Milton, who, remember, is the character that the film is based on. He has decided that his solution to burn the building to the ground is not yet appropriate. However, one of the boxes in favor of burning the building to the ground gets checked off when Lumbergh, comes and takes his favorite stapler. Now that Peter has Joanna's phone number, he comes into the office to get his address book, something that probably seems weird because everyone now has an iPhone. Michael is shocked to see him because he's been gone for 2 days and just walked in at noon wearing casual clothes. He tells Peter that he's supposed to be meeting with the consultants. Peter thinks this actually sounds kind of fun, so he walks into the conference room where they're waiting and he behaves the exact same way he did with Joanna. Instead of seeking their approval or constantly calculating and trying to say the right thing or what he thinks they might want to hear, he just confidently tells them the truth. He tells them that he sneaks in late to work all the time. He spaces out at his desk and in any given week really only accomplishes about 15 minutes of real work. Once again, we see the power of being straightforward, of being an alpha. The consultants respond positively to this straightforward approach as he tells them why nobody cares about their jobs at Initech and why they work just hard enough to not get fired. Which, by the way, as someone who worked at a company very similar to Initech, I can tell you that's precisely what managing a business like that produced. It produced people that did essentially just the bare minimum, just enough work to where they wouldn't get fired. So Peter describes this phenomenon to the consultants, and then he excuses himself from the meeting and ignores Lumberg on his way out. We now go to Joanna's demeaning workplace, and her manager complains that she only has the minimum amount of buttons on her uniform that the regulations call for. He suggests that she express herself and use more buttons than the minimum required number of 15 buttons. He mimics the corporate mind games that management would often play on their employees. He wants her to wear more buttons, but instead of just telling her, wear more buttons, he wants her to make the choice to wear more buttons. He can't just raise the minimum. He has to make her think that it's her idea, but at the same time shame her if she doesn't have the idea. This is a bizarre management tactic that I often saw in the 90s. You would be shamed for only meeting the minimum requirements of the pointless rules, like the number of buttons on your vest, but your only reward for exceeding these pointless guidelines was the absence of being constantly shamed. These big corporate workplaces were completely dehumanizing and cult-like, no matter where you worked, whether it was in an office or at a chain restaurant. Back at Initech, the consultants tell Lumberg they need to lay off Tom. They also inform him that Milton was actually already laid off 5 years ago, but has still been receiving checks through a glitch, so they just fixed the glitch. They have no plans to tell Milton that he's been laid off. They're just going to let the problem work itself out. The scene is comedic because, like most of the comedy in this film, it's just brutally honest. The complete lack of human compassion they have for the workers is obvious. Lumberg largely agrees with the consultants, and things only get awkward when the consultants tell Lumberg they actually like Peter and want to give him a promotion. This is followed by a montage of Peter behaving completely without fear of consequences at the office. He parks in Bill Lumberg's reserved parking spot. He unscrews the doorknob that shocks him every morning. He tears down the corporate propaganda banners. He cleans a fish at his desk and takes the walls off of his cubicle. Because of his alpha behavior with the consultants, he's immune from interference from management, who now kind of are afraid of him. That's another truth this film reveals, the raw power that just being honest and assertive has. So many people, intelligent people, make the mistake of thinking that the way to success is through constantly plotting and manipulating, and don't understand the power of just being unflinchingly honest. It doesn't just attract women. Because it's a characteristic of a true alpha, it changes your relationship with men too. Men don't like other men that are always plotting and scheming because, quite frankly, it's kind of feminine behavior. A man's man is someone who's honest and confident, not cocky, but sure of themselves. And this movie does a great job of showing the difference in how people respond to Peter the Beta and Peter the Alpha, as well as showing that he didn't really change who he was. He just stopped letting the fear of consequences change his behavior. Now we go back to Milton. He's no longer receiving paychecks, and Lumbergh plans to just keep making his life uncomfortable until he stops coming in because he's too much of a corporate coward to actually fire him. Milton, of course, is getting closer and closer to executing his extreme plans. Next, the consultants tell Peter that they're going to lay off Samir and Michael and replace them with entry-level people that'll work for nothing and outsourced overseas labor. This movie is 20 years old, but the current crisis in the workplace has been brewing for a long, long time. I mean, simply because the way the capitalist system is structured, you're always going to end up with sociopaths at the top who only care about the bottom line. That's just simply the way it is. Peter doesn't like this, so he tells Michael that Inatek is going to lay him off. And just like that, the conditions have now been met for the extreme solution that Michael came up with at the very beginning of the movie. There is a virus that they can install that will slowly siphon money from each transaction their banking software makes, and it'll eventually, after years, earn them lots of money. Peter, Michael, and Samir install the virus on the mainframe, and the extreme solution to their problem has been sent into motion. To celebrate the execution of this extreme solution, the three are now feeling reckless and execute another extreme solution by executing the printer that kept jamming on them. And now we get to Tom's extreme solution in response to getting laid off. He tries to commit suicide to get insurance money for his wife, but then his wife finds him in the garage trying to gas himself. Tom decides to change his mind, but is instantly hit by a drunk driver. He survives and wins a big settlement and throws a party. On the way to the party, Peter tells Joanna about their plan, and she disapproves because it's stealing. Also, while at the party, Tom's lawyer makes Samir and Michael extremely nervous by talking about prison. This is when Peter's friend Drew tells him that Joanna used to date and has had sex with Lumbergh. This sparks a fight, and the two break up. The next day, Peter nearly has a heart attack when he checks the account balance on the account they set up for the virus to siphon money into. After one day, it has over $300,000 in it when there really should be closer to $3 or maybe $300. Peter tells Michael and Samir, and they close the account before it can get any bigger, but now they have to figure out what to do about this. The company will certainly notice that kind of money missing from their accounts. Once again, Milton is pushed even closer to his extreme solution when he's the only one to not get a piece of cake at Bill Lumbergh's birthday party, and they move his office into the basement. After thinking about what he got his friends into, Peter decides once again to do the alpha thing and to take responsibility for the heist gone wrong. He decides to return the money and take all the blame. He tells Joanna and makes up with her and finds out that it was actually a totally different Bill Lumbergh that she was dating. And then he leaves the money along with the confession note under the real Bill Lumbergh's door. Peter is ready to accept his fate. He's ready to face the music, but then something unexpected happens. When Peter goes into the office the next morning, the building is on fire. Milton has finally executed his extreme solution to his problem. The solution that he didn't slowly form over time, but the solution he came up with immediately. His initial solution that he placed on the back burner as he searched for another way out. But Milton, having exhausted all of his other options, eventually he was able to justify taking his extreme action and burning the building to the ground. Just like Michael, whose initial solution was to write a virus, he eventually got to a point where the unreasonable seemed reasonable. This is the way these men think. This is how they process conflict. When faced with a problem, their initial thought is an extreme and thorough solution. And it's only the restraint of these men that prevents this solution from being carried out. And if the problem isn't resolved, that restraint, little by little, gets undermined. It forms cracks like a dam until one day that restraint is no longer strong enough to prevent the extreme from being acted upon. With the building burning down, Peter realizes that the evidence is gone. Through this twist of fate, he is now off the hook. And of course, because this is a comedy, essentially everyone lives happily ever after. In the last few moments of the film, we discover that Michael and Samir go get jobs at another tech company, but Peter has learned a valuable lesson. He has learned that his quality of life is more important than the status of having your own cubicle. He no longer wants to be a cog in the huge global machine, a cog that the globalist bosses view as a tool, subject to arbitrary rules to be replaced on a whim when the globalists think that it might make them more money. Peter decides he'd rather just work in construction than deal with that. The sad irony, of course, is that in real life, the globalists will do the same thing to the construction industry that they did with everything else. They just slowly replaced the working class, skilled American tradesmen with cheap illegal immigrant labor, all so that they can enrich themselves at the expense of the American worker. In the last scene, we discover that Milton must have found Peter's envelope full of money before he burned down Initech and is now living it up on a beach somewhere. However, he's unhappy with the service, and once again, his mind goes straight to an extreme solution. The solution that he mumbles to himself to the bad service at the resort is to put strychnine in the guacamole. And the audience is left to imagine whether or not Milton's dam will burst once again, if his restraint will be undermined. The movie is a comedy, and the ending is a bit formulaic and somewhat of a joke. Nobody just lives happily ever after in real life. But I can tell you one thing. After watching this film, I never again worked in a cubicle or memorized a mission statement or met with an efficiency consultant. This film made me understand the humiliating reality of being a corporate America beta cuck and prevented me from ever again becoming a wage slave for the Bill Lumbergs of the world, and taught me the value of understanding your instincts, understanding that the mind comes up with solutions almost immediately, and the only reason people don't act immediately is the fear of consequences. But if you're honest and forthright with your intentions, and you have nothing to hide, people will respect you. And eventually, you will learn to trust your instincts, and most importantly, respect yourself. For Blackpilled, I'm Devon Stack.
I could say so much about this movie and this video that Devon Stack did, but one of the things I want to remember to say, and everybody, Rockman, go ahead and unmute yourself. But what I want to say first is two things. One is that initial, extreme thought that is so true in my mind, and I've said this for years, that I'm nice until I'm not. I have said that to people. I said, I seem very nice until I'm not. Because I've had to learn for years, to deal with anger problems and stuff like this. And I'm like, okay, I can't let my anger get to me because I just got to deal with what I'm dealing with. And then the next thing you know, I'm like, all right, I've had enough. I've had enough. But I don't go to the extreme like this movie talks about. But what Devon Stack will mention in multiple other videos that he does, especially falling down, the take that he does on falling down, and I won't show it because that was the one I tried to upload and I couldn't get it to. That's why the thumbnail doesn't match. But it's the same thing as that you have this initial thought, but ultimately you don't try to play out that crazy reaction. You don't try to actually do that unless you just feel like you've got no other option. Now, again, we are people who love the Lord Jesus Christ, so we're really not trying to act out anything like what this character does just because he's not afraid of consequences anymore, or what the guy in Falling Down does, or the character that is. And the other thing I'll say is, I saw this movie and I'm like, nah, man, 9 to 5 is not for me. I cannot do it. And I've been fired from so many 9 to 5 jobs, like I said, and that's why I have the entrepreneur job, because I won't do this. I will not do this. I promise myself I won't do this. In fact, it was hard to quit the job that I did have to even get into what I got into, but man, before I even knew I could trust the Lord to see me through it, He saw me through it. If you want to do something, guys, you can do it. But anyway, Rockman, are you there? What have you got to say?
Yeah, so I'm still here, and watching that again, it's really kind of blowing my mind all over again because all it's really doing is reaffirming my own position as to not only reaffirming my own position, but justifying my initial instincts for the last 10 to 15 years of not wanting to voluntarily stay in a box for hours at a time to make someone else more money or make someone else happy that doesn't really care about me, especially when it feeds into a system that's meant to subjugate me and would rather see me dead.
Talk about like the being expendable too. I have worked jobs where I put in hours of work, and I would even do overtime stuff, and yeah, I got paid overtime, but I felt like it mattered. And then just getting fired, because like I said, I've been fired from many jobs, and then to just get fired and not even, and then be like, it took me, unfortunately, a few too many jobs of being fired to realize they don't care about me. I'm totally expendable.
Yes, all you really are is a name and a number on a list, no matter what institution you join, whether it be a corporation, whether it be even military, name and number, just a manpower, an empty body, and it's also devoting half, if not most, of your life in the service of others, and not yourself, and more importantly, not God. You're not serving God unless you're fortunate and blessed to be in a position where you're where God wants you to be, and you're serving Him where you are. Then that's great. But I think we're meant to have more personal autonomy. We're supposed to be more sovereign.
I think that's perfect because they also bring in the waitress. I think that he didn't catch some things that I catch only because different experiences. But I was a waitress for years, you guys. I was a waitress for as long as I had a career in medicine because that's what I did when I first started. Getting it. I worked in the food industry from age of 14. I was a busser, and then I was a dishwasher, and then I was a cook, and then I was a waitress in college. And you get these restaurant jobs, man. Oh my gosh, they're the worst. In fact, I tried to get back into. I was a PA for 7 years, and I worked in medicine for 10 years. And when my husband died, I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to do medicine for a minute. It's a long story. I'd be happy to tell it sometime, but not tonight. But I was like, I'm not going to go back to medicine. So I went and got a waitressing job because it's like what the other thing that I knew so well. And I'll forget it. After a month, I was like, I'm not carrying these heavy trays in these plates and having people treat me like crap and me like practically begging for a good tip. No, I'm done with it. Like, I'm so done with it. And then I went and sold motorcycles for a while. But again, it was a 9 to 5 job. And while it was fun and I had a lot of freedom because it's motorcycles, man. Like, you can't sell Harley Davidson motorcycles. And I mean, I don't know. It just wasn't a strict job. But I just knew like I need to be home with my kids. I can't do this stuff. Anyway, I don't know. It's so good that he pointed out, like, well, he didn't point it out, but that the movie points out, like Mike Judge points out the waitressing position. Like, that's why she was in shock. She's like, you can't just quit your job. Like, we have to do this crap. I went out to dinner with my kids tonight for the first time. We don't go that, we just don't do it. It's like every 4 months treat. So we go out to dinner tonight, and the server somehow knows me. I don't remember how I know him, God bless him. And I hope he doesn't watch this. I did mention my YouTube. I just don't remember how I know him though. And I'm just looking at him going, man, like he knows me. He's probably about the same age as me. And yet he's still sitting here like doing this difficult, stressful job of waiting tables in a busy environment. And you're just dependent on the tips because, just forget it. Like, anyway, go on. I'll let you talk.
Well, my perspective. Well, first off, I just want to say that the movie highlights, main character, but I think there's more than one main character, and we saw a bit of every one of ourselves in this movie. I personally identify both, well, not both, but three characters in there, even four, even Michael Bolton character, where I'll react rashly immediately, like Samir, while plotting in the back of my head, because I would describe myself as the whitest brown person ever. So, I'm essentially doing both. So seeing the extremes carried out in such a way and allows me to kind of pick out, scenarios in real life or other movies and documentaries where that might have been the case as well.
I will have to maybe show the Falling Down one because I watched it again for the first time. I thought the funniest part that I didn't think I had watched it, but then I remembered I had when they had the secret Nazi room. And I know it's not related to what we were just talking about, but this is what I love about Blackpilled because he's always going to point out anytime that they're totally like ditching on the white man. And it was so funny because in that movie Falling Down, he runs into a Nazi who has a secret like Hitler bunker or whatever with Hitler propaganda all over the places. Anyway, it was very interesting that they had like that's what they keep. And Falling Down was back in the 90s too. They've been pushing this rhetoric forever. And by the way, guys, if you think that the coronavirus is something that's going to come kill us, it's not. Please go watch Where We Go When We Go All's video that he just put up last night. He called it like Y2K coronavirus because they've been doing this for decades. Like it's Y2K or it's the Zika virus or it's the avian flu and like I always remember hearing about this and never being scared. It's just another thing. Please don't be afraid. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't things going on, but for goodness sake, if people are out there fear-mongering, get off their channel or tell them to find Jesus because, oh my gosh, let's stop all this. But I digress.
There's so many narratives in play that if you're essentially paying attention to all of it, it's essentially designed to make you panic and afraid. That doesn't necessarily mean the information is false. There's a lot of false information out there. Don't get me wrong, but it's essentially in this point in time, 2 months in, not 1 month, 2 months in. There's just so many hands in the cookie jar, a lot of fingers in the same soup bowl. I don't know how many metaphors I can squeeze in there, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I think that, there's a lot of people trying to cover it. And what I will say is I'm really happy if Bubba comes back around. I'm really happy to see that Bubba seems to be looking to the Lord again. That's good news. I mean, I don't know. I haven't checked it out, but I was a little worried that I had sent a lot of people to Bubba and they were like, well, he's scaring me. And I'm like, oh no, like, yeah, just, but I think he's kind of stopped the fear mongering and going back to the scriptures and just remembering who really is in control.
Yeah, in the beginning, it wasn't even as if the information he was presenting was wrong. It was just how he was reacting to it, which was kind of like throwing me off and might have been throwing a few other people off. But it seems like he's got like a really good perspective on things now, especially when that perspective is on God, and I think you can go learn a thing or two.
So I should go back and probably watch what he's saying now. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, to be honest, I've been kind of following my own sources and doing my own thing, and I go back on this channel and hit my likes and support him and stuff. But I'm kind of like we're all essentially in the same spot now. The information's been out there for a long time now, and we're all just kind of piecing everything together.
Okay, well, kind of back to Office Space, and you said it red pilled you, so maybe it's gonna. Some of these people that were on here tonight haven't seen it, and so my recommendation is definitely watch it. I was kind of nervous because I love Devon Stack, but he does a great job of exposing what movies are about. So when I first saw that he was covering Office Space, I was a little nervous because I was like, oh no, he's going to make me realize that I can't enjoy this movie. And I was so excited when it was exactly the opposite when I was, he loved the movie. So you never know. It's always a good surprise. And again, I'm going to point out to you guys, you don't have to stop watching movies. You don't have to stop listening to music. And maybe Devon Stack is not even all the way right, but the cool thing is we can point these things out and either enjoy these movies or realize that they're negative for us and negative energy and not do that. What do you say about that, Rockman?
I started watching Stack's channel at a time when I was kind of disillusioned with all the other channels and people I was trying to follow because they demonstrated themselves to be as either part of the establishment, desiring to be part of the establishment, or just serving the establishment. Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes come to mind. So, and even Owen Benjamin. But I don't want to go too much into all that. But it's just we have to pray for discernment, and part of that discernment that God gives us is showing us who He wants us to follow. And He'll occasionally point us to someone that may be questionable at first, and the information they provide just becomes super useful later on. Only the Lord knows what the future brings, and He's essentially our compass, our spiritual compass.
It's interesting that you mentioned Owen Benjamin because Owen Benjamin gave a shout out to Paul Romano today or yesterday or something. And I was like, wait, what? Owen Benjamin's watching Pockets of the Future, Paul Romano? It was really strange to me. And I was like, wait a minute, because I don't trust Owen Benjamin as far as I can throw him, which is no distance at all. I don't trust the guy. I don't know. You brought it up, so I had to say that.
Well, he essentially grew up and had a professional career too close to the darkness that we speak of as far as like Hollywood goes. And a lot of that still affects him today, including the way he interacts with other people and even with his own family. I respect a lot of what he's doing. He has a farm. He milks goats. He's doing a lot of things that I want to do. And he's saying a lot of really nice things. But sometimes we get caught up on like some manufactured drama, try to piggyback on someone else's clout, and it's just kind of disingenuous.
And he like does drugs and drinks live. I've seen. I don't really care about that. Well. Anyway, yeah. Go
I
ahead.
haven't seen him do that because I haven't watched any of his videos lately. But I guess if he is doing that, that's not good. It's not good optics.
I don't know that how often he's done it. It's just that he does it now. Okay. We all make mistakes, and before anyone goes, oh, actually, people don't do that here. I don't know why I say things like this because people don't do that to me here. But I was gonna say before anybody says, oh, we all make mistakes. Obviously that's my inner voice saying that, or that's Jesus actually saying, Aaron, we all make mistakes. I'm just gonna say though, I just get a weird feeling about Owen Benjamin, but he is right. I commented on his video. I never watch Owen Benjamin. It's just the fact that he had Pockets of the Future in his title. And I was like, is he talking about Paul Romano? Now, here's the thing about Paul Romano, for anybody that you don't know, he's not a Christian. He is into this kind of strange heartfulness meditation, which is a little bit too Kundalini-like for me. But he's really, really, really good at pointing out celebrity, MK Ultra, Monarch Mind Control stuff. He's got a very, very vast knowledge of everything that's going on there, and he catches on to it very quickly. He covers a lot of the Hollywood celebrity stuff, quite a bit of the politics, but also sports, and so he's very good at that. And I would say, like, don't worry about his heartfulness meditation stuff. I don't watch any of those videos. I don't watch anything that he talks about that goes against Jesus Christ, and I don't watch the heartfulness stuff. But he is hilarious. I just watch him, and he'll be laughing about some post. And by the way, I know I'm totally digressing, but he did a video tonight, and I almost wanted to share that with you guys in the Discord, but I'm careful because he swears. But it was so funny because there's going to be apparently like what do you call it? The dating show. What's that dating show called? Bachelor. There's going to be like a Bachelor for elderly people, I guess, coming on. I don't know. Bachelor for elderly people. Is that something anyone would even tune into?
I don't know. We'll probably have to, workshop.
What? I missed you. You fell off there.
I was just chuckling. I was just saying we'll workshop that.
Workshop. Okay. Well, I think that with that, I could go on and digress for hours. So instead of digressing for hours, I'll put my kids to bed, and that way we can get up and be ready for church on time tomorrow. I'm going to pray unless you would like to, Rockman. I always offer it, but I don't pressure anyone. It's not a pressure thing. Sometimes people just feel like they want to pray, so it's up to you. You let me know.
I do have a prayer, actually. It just came to me just before you asked me, and I think I was supposed to do it. So,
amen. Let's hear it. I'm ready. Let's go.
Lord, not only do I pray for our brothers and sisters who are with us in Christ, but I also pray for the ones that aren't in Christ yet. And I especially pray for the ones who have deluded themselves into thinking that they have a relationship with you, and instead have a relationship with other spirits out there, other demons, other idols, money, fame, their cars, their video games, any little distraction that basically gets in the way of having a relationship with you, Lord. And I pray that you remove those obstacles in our lives, and just bring us all closer to you, Lord. I know you give all of us a chance to seek salvation. You died for all of our sins, but we have to redeem ourselves. Or you have to redeem us. We have to repent. So put it in the hearts of those that are constantly hard, and soften their hearts and their demeanors, and Lord, just give us a break this year. It's only been 2 months, and we have like a lot of things going on. Give us a little bit of rest, a little bit of respite, and just guide us all together. Everyone who has eyes to see and ears to hear, Lord, just bring them all together and prepare us, Lord. Prepare us for whatever it is that you have in store for us. Amen.
Whew, you moved me to tears, whether you believe it or not, when you said, Lord, give us a break and give us peace. It's only been 2 months into the year, and I was like, oh, yeah. Whew, I'm not crying. I'm not. What? There's something in the air. I don't know what it is. Anyway, whew. You're right. You were meant to pray that, and I don't know if it was just even for me, but I'll take it because wow, I felt that. Yeah, we need some peace. We really do. We work hard. We do a lot of research, and I know you do. I know I do, and I know a lot of other people. Even though we disagree and agree with some people in my Discord channel, man, it's there. We have to remember to have peace. We have to remember to just be at peace, because that is what we were promised. The Lord did not promise us to be stressed out with the research. He didn't say you will research everything and you will be stressed out by it while you tell everybody. He said no, you'll be at peace. And I was reading Acts again this morning where Paul was in the prison singing, and then the chains all came off and the doors opened, but nobody left, and the jailer was so nervous, and he's like, no, we're still here, Paul. And then he preached to the jailer and saved the jailer and his family. And oh man, I mean, yeah, that's the kind of peace we need, where we can go to jail and we can still praise the Lord, guys. That's the kind of peace we need. So I want to say thank you, Rockman, for being here. Kind of impromptu, and I love that you could do this stuff on the fly, and you're willing to just come on the fly. I think that's great. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, it was a pleasure. I'm glad to hang out with you guys.
And thank you even more for the prayer that was definitely directed for me.
Yeah, that prayer is for everyone. Everyone needs it. There's always a good idea to pray. Whenever someone likes to throw it out as a platitude or something, even that I agree with, because every reason is a good reason to.
Oh, for sure. But yet it just hit my heart. So I thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to go put my kiddos into bed and say goodnight to you, and peace and love of the Lord to everybody. And thanks again for you, and thanks to everybody here. I mean that with all my heart. And go to bed, have rest, sleep, and we will see you guys next time. All right?
Have a good night, everyone. God bless.
Peace.